Hi, this is Dr. Getz. In this video, we are going to be working through how to use sources in your senior exhibition essay. By this point, you've probably already written portions of your essay that do use sources. So some of what you're going to do in this lesson today is going to help you go back and revise or edit what you've already written, and also help you as you're moving forward with completing writing your essay in the next few weeks. All right, by the end of this lesson, these are the goals. You should be able to state the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Hopefully this is review for everyone. You should know when to quote, paraphrase, or summarize. You should have working knowledge of how to introduce quotes, paraphrases, and summaries into your own sentences using three different options: seamless integration, a signal phrase with the author's name, and then what we're calling the colon method. You should then, at the bottom of this lesson, have access to and know how to use a list of verbs that will help you create better signal phrases. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Using sources. There are many reasons why we have to be able to use sources and use them well. One of the most important ones that I want to stress for you, especially for a project like senior exhibition, is that the way you use sources is part of your appeal to ethos. So remember, anytime you're engaged in any act of communication, you are appealing to logos, that's reason or logic, pathos, that would be emotion, and ethos, that would be authority or credibility, in order to successfully persuade readers. A huge part of your appeal to ethos, your appeal to credibility, is your ability to use sources well and properly. You are proving to your readers that you are reliable, that you are trustworthy, that you have evaluated sources well, and that you can use them well. If you are writing in the humanities, using sources will involve quotations. And all of you who've gone through the senior charter system know how to use quotations to support your point. But if you're writing in the sciences and social sciences, you're going to be moving away a little bit from quotations to paraphrase and summary. Regardless, you will be using sources, and how you do that is a huge part of your appeal to ethos. So let's all pay attention and work hard, knowing that this is actually a big part of what makes us appealing to our readers. All right, so a review of what is quoting, what is paraphrasing, and what is summarizing, and when to do each of those things. A quotation is really whenever you're using another person's exact word, phrase, or sentence. You want to use quotation when specific wording is really necessary to keep. Someone has said something in such a unique and specific way that you really have to keep that wording. You might also want to keep it when words are, quote, strikingly original or express key concepts so compellingly. Notice this is a quotation that is strikingly original, or expresses an idea in a compelling way. If an author is using vocabulary in a unique way, you would want to use a quotation. And here, even if it's a specific word, just one word that an author is using in a unique way, then you'll need to use quotation marks. Or then finally, if the person speaking or writing is an authority that you want to appeal to in your essay, then you would need a quotation in that case. What is a paraphrase? A paraphrase is still another person's ideas, but in your words. A paraphrase is going to be about the same number of words, your words, as original author's words. Summary is also another person's ideas in your words. It's just that you're going to use significantly fewer of your own words than the original. So you could summarize an entire article in like 2 sentences or something. But for a paraphrase, if you're paraphrasing 2 sentences, then you're writing about 2 sentences. When do you use each? You would use a paraphrase in order to shorten a longer passage into a slightly shorter passage. So say you want to write about a paragraph from an author's work, and you want to devote 3 or 4 sentences to it. Well, that would be considered a paraphrase. If you want to state an author's main ideas concisely, and to retain the key concepts of an author without all the detail. Now, when would you use a summary? When you need to greatly condense an author's ideas, you would summarize. When the details are really kind of unimportant to your point and you just want to get the basic ideas from a source, or when you just want to highlight certain basic ideas from an original source, then you would summarize. But summary and paraphrase are definitely more similar, obviously, than quotation, because both of these involve you replacing another person's words, though you're referring to their ideas. For all three of these, you're always going to integrate the source into your own sentence and then cite it at the end of using that source. So if you're in doubt about whether something is common knowledge or you need to cite it, please use this table. But generally speaking, if it's not common knowledge, that means do at least 5 credible sources have the same information without citation. If it's not common knowledge and you've gotten it from a source, yes, you do need to cite it, whether you're quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing. All right. Right now, some of you may want to pause the video, go back and check over your material, find stuff that you've quoted, paraphrased, or summarized to make sure that you have integrated it and that you have cited it. Then come back to this and we'll talk, and you can see exactly, okay, how do I get better at integrating quotations? How do I make sure that I'm using them properly within my own writing? So this material is drawn from Integrating Source Evidence into Your Writing by Susan Lass and Candice Naveau. I've added highlighting here for emphasis. And I'm going to go over this just very quickly with you. I would like you to, this document is available to you on Classroom, so I would like you to take some time on your own and read it over more carefully. All right, the most important thing I want you to know is that quotations should be used in your senior exhibition project, but they should be used sparingly, especially in the social sciences or sciences, in which case you'll hardly use quotation and you'll really depend on paraphrase and summary. But even in the humanities, that relies more upon quotation. Anytime you use someone else's words, it's kind of interrupting your own flow of ideas, and it can make it seem like you don't have ideas of your own. So use quotations sparingly, and only when you really should be using a quotation should you quote. Now, you've decided, I really do need to quote. All right, how are you going to integrate quotations correctly? There's 2 levels of integrating quotations correctly. At the argument level, number 1, and number 2 at the grammatical level. So first let's talk about the argument level. All right, at the argument level, you need to create what is called here and elsewhere a quotation sandwich. So introduce, cite, explain. Here's what a quotation sandwich looks like. Before your quotation, you introduce the idea the quotation will support. Then you'll have your quotation concluded by a citation. That's a parenthetical citation in both MLA and APA. And then you're going to have your explanation. Sometimes in our programs we call this commentary or analysis. But the point here is you explain how the quote helps support your claim. So once you have made sure that you're introducing, this is your own sentence or long phrase, you have your quote, and you've explained, now it's time to talk about the grammatical level of integration. And here's where, quite frankly, many of you, especially in the Flex program, have some work to do. This is something you need to improve on. The second level of integration is grammatical. There are 3 main methods to integrate quotations grammatically. One of them is called seamless integration, and here's where you embed quoted words as if they were an organic part of your sentence. This is a little more difficult to do, but it can be done. You're all big kids, you can do this. The second one is the signal phrase method, and this is where you use an author plus a verb to introduce the quotation. And that you're clearly labeling that the quotation comes from a specific source by doing that. And then finally there is the colon method. This you would use especially if you're introducing a longer quotation, one that's longer than 4 lines, like a block quotation, but you can use it other times as well. All right, so let's look at some examples. Here's the following opening sentence from A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It's one of the world's most famous sentences. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. All right, let's see how seamless integration would embed this quotation as a seamless part of your sentence. Charles Dickens begins his novel with the paradoxical observation that the 18th century was both, quote, the best of times and, quote, the worst of times. So We don't have this Charles Dickens says thing or anything like that. It's just your own sentence. And if I didn't say quote here and here, a person just listening to me read would not know that there is a quotation in that sentence because it has been seamlessly integrated with the author's own grammar. Now, a signal phrase. How do you do a signal phrase? To do a signal phrase, you introduce the author and then the quote using what we call a signal verb. And at the bottom of this document, we're going to have this table 15.2 with a list of those for you to consult. So here's how this might look. Describing the 18th century, Charles Dickens observes, quote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." So we have Charles Dickens, the author named, first and last name, and then observes, and this is, an appropriate verb to introduce this quotation. All right, how do you do the colon method? If your own introductory words form a complete sentence, then you can use a colon to introduce and set off the quotation. Dickens defines the 18th century as a time of paradox. Colon. This is a complete sentence, subject, verb, and can stand alone. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Or, the 18th century was a time of paradox. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Both of those work. I want you to notice that for each of these, do you have a quotation hanging out on its own? A little naked, shivering, cold quotation hanging out on its own without your own grammatical structure to introduce it? No, you always need to clothe your quotations. You need to integrate them into a sentence of your own. This is basic. You absolutely must do this for your senior exhibition. So in order to clothe your quotations with the grammatical structure of your own, choose either seamless integration following this example, signal phrase following this example, or the colon method following this example. Those are your options. You need to make sure that you've used them each time. Use one of them each time you use a quotation. All right. This is something that's just really helpful for you guys to know. Sometimes you need to edit a quotation very lightly. It's not like you want to change words within the quotation, but you might need to take one or two out or add one in just to integrate it grammatically with your own sentence. So how do you do that? If you need to add in a word, like replace the pronoun with a proper noun, or add in a that or something like that, you're going to use a square bracket around the word that you have changed or added. If you need to remove words from the middle of a quotation, not from the beginning or the end, we don't need to do this at either the beginning or the end of a quotation. It's understood that you were taking a quotation out of larger material. I don't need to see beginning or end ellipses. But if you're taking material out of the middle of a quotation, please use the ellipses, the 3 dots, the ... to indicate that words have been removed from the sentence. 4 dots will indicate that a substantial amount of text has been deleted, including a period at the end of a sentence. So if you're skipping 3 sentences and then picking up with a quotation that's, the 4th sentence later, then you would use the 4 dot option instead of just the 3. All right. How is it then that you integrate paraphrases and summaries? Well, I have good news for you. It's easier to do because you're already taking someone else's words and ideas and just keeping the ideas and putting it into all of your own words. The integration is much easier in terms of integration. All you need to do is argument level integration. You don't have to merge someone else's grammar and writing style into your own sentence like you have to do when you're doing a quotation. So here's a sample paraphrase. I'll let you guys read this on your own. Here's a sample summary. Notice that both of them are still going to have a quotation or a citation at the end of it, because even though you're not using that person's words, you're still using someone else's ideas. And when we're using sources, we always cite when we use someone else's words or ideas. All right, if we come down here, let's have a moment to talk about signal verbs. Some of you overuse the word says or talks about, and you need to stop. You just need to stop doing that. The verbs that you use with the author's name when you're using the signal method need to reflect the author's rhetorical purpose. So what is the author doing in the quoted passage? Is the author describing something, explaining, arguing, giving examples? Choose the verb carefully. Also, I just want to point out to you quickly, only people argue. Only people describe. Articles don't describe. Paragraphs don't describe or explain. Essays don't describe or explain. Books don't. only people. So you really have to use an author with these signal verbs. Now, what if you don't have an author? Well, you're going to have to use a signal verb that goes with an article, or you're going to have to choose like the organization that publishes the website to refer to go with the verb instead of just saying in the article it warns. Articles don't do anything, okay? Articles don't warn or urge or recommend or any of these things. So you need to be careful when you're using your signal verbs that you're using them with a subject. Remember we have subject verb pairs that actually makes sense, that actually is possible. So if we drop down here now, you'll see commonly used signal verbs, so many of them. If we're making a claim, choose from this portion, recommending, these ones, disagreeing or questioning, these ones, showing, these ones, expressing agreement here, and additional signal verbs that just don't fall into any of those categories, but could be useful to you. And then finally, be careful with phrasing after your signal verb. Sometimes you do need to say argues that, observes that, and that's fine. If you use a that after your signal phrase here, you don't need a comma. Okay, just remember that. If it just said Smith argues, I would see a comma and then the quotation. If I have a that, then I will see no comma. All right. Let me just remind you now what this lesson is intended to teach you. You should now be able to clearly state the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, and know when to do each. You should have a better idea of how to introduce quotes, phrases, and summaries into your own sentences. You know now that there are 3 options available to you: seamless integration, signal phrase, and the colon method. And now you have access to and know how to use the list of those verbs for the signal phrase method. All right, guys, good luck writing this portion of your senior exhibition.